All right, so essentially when you do these apps, you can do it in one file, but the way that they teach you and do everything else is through two files. So the first thing you need to do is create an app called Shiny Apps somewhere. Okay, so let's all go and do that. Wherever you want your working directory to be, make a folder called Shiny Apps and set your working directory to be Shiny Apps. So you want to create a folder, Shiny Apps, and then just set your working directory to be Shiny Apps. And then within that, you need to create a folder called Basketball, and that's where we're going to keep our file. So I have multiple apps in this folder, and that's how you have to do it. So you have your Shiny Apps folder, you have a folder for each one of your apps, and then you run app folder name, and it's going to run it for you. So take a minute, do that. OK, so within each folder here, so these folders represent our apps now. Within each one, you have to have a UI file, and you have to have a server file. So the UI file stands for user interface, and the server stands for server, and this is going to run all of the R code. Okay? So the UI will set up your user interface and what your app looks like, and the server will run all the background R stuff that you got going on. So in those 5 files you have a UI and a server file. Go ahead and take all 5 of those files and move them into your basketball folder. OK, so one thing about these UI and server files, they're not standard R code. Like in the server.R code where you have your standard R code, you have to wrap those within Shiny functions. So there's going to be things like render plot, and then you can make a plot, or render table, and then you create a table. And so you will have to take your usual R code and actually do some Shiny stuff around it. OK, so hopefully we have all of that set up. I just want to briefly describe the layouts, and then we'll get into making our app. So your UI file, again, user interface file, this is going to describe how the app looks. So here are the first 2 functions that you need. And actually, I think you need a library Shiny function, library Shiny above this. I don't have that here. But essentially, you're creating a Shiny user interface, and it's using a fluid page that allows it to change. That's one of the functions of Shiny. I'm going to have a fluid row, which will allow that row to change a bit as well. And then within the row, I now want to define sort of my format for my page. And so they have some built-in formats that are really easy to use. There's this sidebar layout, which essentially puts a side panel and then a main panel. And so that's usually the easiest thing to do whenever you start learning something. So with the sidebar layout, you have to define a sidebar panel and then a main panel. And so, oops, I'm using the wrong button. And so this is all you have to do that. And they also have things like title panel, which will be just a row across the top if you want to put that there. But let me just show you what this looks like. It won't be very pretty, but is this the right thing? Yes. So the sidebar layout will have something on the left sidebar, and then the main stuff here. And you could put a title above that as well. Now, I personally hate just using like the sort of standard things. I want to have so much manipulation and control here. So even if I was going to do this, I would still want to do it myself rather than use theirs. And so there's a very easy way to make your own columns and things. And that's to use this column function. And so with the columns in the R Shiny apps, they must be a width of 12. Okay? So within each fluid row, you can create columns. And as long as you have columns that the width of them add up to 12, you're going to be good to go. So here I made a column of width 9 and then of width 3. So I'm going to have a big thing on the left and then a little thing on the right. Okay. You can also sort of nest these things. So you can get a row with a column that has a row in it with 2 columns or something like that. And so that's what we have going on down here. So can't scroll down. Well, anyway, you can sort of see what's going on here. So within a column, I've created a new row. And there's got to be 2 columns in there that add up, well, there's got to be a column in there that adds up to 12. So we have 2 columns that add up to 12 there. Let me just show you what this one looks like. I got to open a file real quick. Comment and uncomment. Why isn't page down working?
How did you do that comment trick? Where you comment everything?
So this is an option R Shiny Alt-C, or you can do Control-Shift-C, I guess, and I don't have to go up here anymore. But that'll comment or uncomment an entire section. So now we can run this other one we're looking at here, this other layout. Can't see anything. And so this one has your upper part, which had a 9 and then a 3. And then we had a column with 2 subcolumns, and then a third column over here. All right. So you can really manipulate this and get it to look like sort of whatever you want. But there are built-in functions if you don't want to have all that extra work of putting that in there. So that's the basics of the UI file. Okay, so it's setting up what it looks like, and later we're going to put in the outputs that we want and all the inputs that we want to get as well into this file. So any questions about the UI? The server file, the most basic thing that you need is just a file that contains this function. So it says Shiny server. It's got an input and an output. You can also put some other things up here, but these are the basics. And then within here, you're going to build your graphics, your tables, etc. And then you close it up here. So that's nothing too much right now. So those are the basics of what your UI and server files will look like. And again, UI is the user interface. Server is where you're going to put all your R stuff and create all of your different output. Okay, so how do you actually get user input? Well, there's a lot of different functions that will do this. And if you go to the tutorial on the Shiny website, lesson 3, they have this whole section on control widgets. So here are all the different things that you can, the basic things that you can have the user do. So you have buttons, date range, radio buttons, single checkbox, etc. So these are all the basic sort of inputs that you can get from the user. The functions that you run to get these things, you can create an action button, that's a function. So these are all the function names, slider input, and then you give it a name and some other fun stuff. So these are the things that we will put in our UI file that will create the things the user sees and manipulates. As for creating output, in lesson 4 they tell you how to do output. And the major functions here, if you want to create output, are these render functions. So you can render image, plot, print, table, text, and UI. Okay, so this render UI is something I just started using, and I'm getting an error with it, or a warning with it. But it's doing what I want after I play around with it. I don't know exactly how to use that yet, but I'm getting there. And then so once you've rendered this in your server file, so these ones will go in your server file. Once you've done these rendering things, you can then go back to your UI file and then call the things that you just rendered. So you can call a plot that you just rendered, you can call a table that you just rendered, and it will output it to the user. Okay. So that's the basic idea about the UI and server files.